This is a tale about the beginning of the world and the beginning of life. The unique fact about the 50th state of the United States is that the beginning is still going on. The heat of creation still happening. The very first day and the newest day still fused together and flowering. By any measure, there is no place on earth as grand, as agreeable, as stupendous as this arch of islands in the North Pacific called Hawaii. But how isolated these fragments of paradise are. Actually 132 islands and atolls stretching across 1,600 trackless miles of sea. In fact, the 8 principal islands we all know as the 50th state are the remotest land in all the world, more than 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. And this explains why, from the beginning, Hawaii remained suspended in time and space, undiscovered, unimaginable, until almost yesterday. Hawaii, USA, now crossing from the 20th to the 21st century with more than 1 million people in residence, plus 7 million vacationers who arrive from all points of the compass every year to bake in the sun and cool off in the waters of paradise. Adam and Eve are found almost anywhere on Hawaii, Maui, Lanai, Kauai, Oahu, Molokai, and Ni'ihau. Frankly, Adam sometimes is seen alone. Likewise, Eve is observed from time to time at sunrise, alone with Eden's ocean. True to the story of creation, members of the first family are relative latecomers in paradise. Much earlier, naturally, were birds and bees, and the myriad plant life that got an even prior start in Eden. Now approaching the youngest and largest of the Hawaiian Islands, Hawaii by name, known to most people simply as the Big Island. Roughly the size of Connecticut, the Big Island is not only bigger than all the others, but it's getting bigger every year because of this. The beginning mentioned a moment ago, the source and fountainhead of all the islands. Kilauea and Mauna Loa are the Earth's most active volcanoes. As recently as 1984, they erupted simultaneously, and since then, Kilauea has either been brooding close to the surface or doing this. Many thousands of feet beneath this spectacle on the Pacific floor is something scientists call a hotspot, a cleft in the Earth's mantle that allows elements of its pressurized and molten core to reach upward to the surface, where it maneuvers in the free atmosphere of gravity and all the forces of life. Because part of the ocean floor itself is inching across the hot spot in a northwesterly direction, the oldest Hawaiian islands are at the northwest tip of the chain, while the youngest sits directly over the spot, adding to its own territory at the rate of about 10 acres per year. Kauai in the northwest is roughly 5 million years old. The Big Island, directly atop the furnace, less than 1 million, and growing. Without question, the most unusual public promenade on Earth is in Volcanoes National Park on the Big Island, where visitors stroll through recently cooled fields of lava amid vents of sulfur steam. Looking across such an eerie terrain, it's hard not to recognize the moonscape photos sent back to Earth by the Apollo astronauts, or better, those from the Voyager probe in deeper space. And you realize that this too is a planet, kin to all the others, and made of the same raw materials. The science of volcanology was born on the Big Island early in the 20th century, when researchers founded the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. Techniques developed here are in use around the world. In fact, Hawaiian names are now part of the geological vocabulary everywhere. Examples: Pahoehoe is the name given to this type of cooled lava with its smooth, billowy texture, like folds of fabric or coils of rope. Factors including temperature and gas content cause Pahoehoe to flow in a smooth consistency and to cool that way. Compare lava that once had a different temperature and gas content. The scientific name is A'a, spelled simply with two A's. Jagged, spiny, rough, A'a is a challenge to walk on and comprises much of the landscape of Volcanoes National Park. Lava turns quickly to stone, and aided by rain, wind, time, and the sea, is transformed into stunning black sand beaches, a continuing process on the Big Island of Hawaii. It performs other feats. At Lava Tree State Park, there are tree molds formed by an eruption in the year 1790 that swept through a forest. Trees encased in lava burned away, leaving the chimney-like formations. And at Volcanoes National Park, near one of the major craters, is a strange phenomenon called a Thurston lava tube, a natural tunnel made by the flowing lava itself as it cools on the outside, forming an interior passageway like a vein or artery. These stones tell a story. Hawaii's Big Island is growing fast. The rate of flow from the hot spot is 5 times the pace of 50 years ago. It is a fiery process of destruction as lava rolls over forested or even populated areas. But it's also a creative process. Given Hawaii's environment, all that's needed is time. Indeed, some life forms can begin to regenerate themselves out of this bleak landscape within a single year. At this moment, 20 miles off the Big Island's south coast, the newest Hawaiian island appears to be in the process of birth. And it already has a name, Loihi, a volcano 3,000 feet beneath the waves and 10,000 feet above the ocean floor, reaching for the sky. Probably within 50, 60, or 80,000 years, it will succeed. Rainbow Falls, just a few miles up the Wailuku River from Hilo, the Big Island's county seat. Here on the windward side of the island, rainfall averages 139 inches per year, soaked up by the rich volcanic soil of paradise, helping to give the Big Island another nickname, the Orchid Island. Orchids and more. A special part of Hawaii's history is preserved on the Big Island's Kona coast at a site called Pu'uhonua Ohonaunau, a place of refuge. There's an atmosphere of mystery here, as if at an archaeological site. And this is so because of the puzzle that continues to surround the first human beings who came to the islands. Who were they? Exactly when did their epic voyages begin? Scientists and historians believe that the first natives were part of the same great wave of explorers and settlers that began migrating from Southeast Asia and Malaysia perhaps 8,000 or 9,000 years ago to populate all the Pacific Islands. The original Hawaiians probably sailed north from the Marquesas and Tahiti starting around the 7th century AD. These incredible voyages were accomplished without maps or navigation equipment across thousands of miles of the loneliest waters in the world. The great double-hulled canoes could carry as many as 50 people, plus food, plants, and animals, on journeys lasting weeks and months on end. If the same thing were done today, even with maps, it would still be an astonishing achievement. The first Hawaiians were masters of their environment, at home with the sea and the land that embraced them. They took what was needed, planted and harvested enough to live and live well, in a manner that was practical and highly organized. But they were also bound by a rigid system of taboos known as kapu. In general, females were subservient. It was kapu for a woman to eat coconuts, or many varieties of bananas, or certain kinds of fish. It was kapu to walk in the shadow of a royal personage, or even to allow the shadow to touch oneself. The penalty? Death. Much was at stake. To flaunt one of these laws might bring catastrophe to a village in the form of a tidal wave or volcanic eruption. On the 18th of January, 1778, 1,000 years after Hawaii's discovery, it was discovered again. The English explorer, Captain James Cook, arrived off Kauai during harvest time and was immediately welcomed not just as a haole, a foreigner, but as the god of agriculture. For a while, he and his men were feted and celebrated. For 2 weeks, the haules ate, drank, caroused, bartered merchandise, and reprovisioned their ships. Cook, meantime, named his discovery after his benefactor in Britain, the Earl of Sandwich, First Lord of the Admiralty. And so, all at once, these were the Sandwich Islands. Cook sailed away, spending the spring and early summer of '78 in the frozen Bering Strait of Alaska in a vain quest for a northern passage to the Atlantic. And then, exhausted and malnourished, the expedition set a course south and west again, to the tropics. This time, the haules, with their gunpowder and ambition, ran into trouble. In February, one of Cook's ships broke a mast during a storm off the Big Island and limped into Kealakekua Bay. The harvest was over, and suddenly these weary foreigners didn't look like gods anymore. And so it didn't take long for a quarrel to develop. On the night of February 13th, some natives stole a longboat from one of the ships. Next morning, Cook himself went ashore with a small party of armed men, with the idea of kidnapping one of the local chiefs as ransom. A crowd of natives gathered. The mood turned ugly. There was a scuffle, then a fight. Shots were fired and several natives fell, while others attacked the captain with clubs and knives. Cook was killed. Among those who escaped the ordeal at Kealakekua Bay on February 14, 1789, was one of Cook's senior officers, William Bligh, who later made history of his own as skipper of the HMS Bounty. In the decade that followed, various rival chieftains waged war against each other, aided by various haules with guns and ships. In the end, the cleverest politician, the strongest warrior, and the most gifted administrator turned out to be one person, Kamehameha. He was aggressive, smart, far-sighted, and ambitious. He understood the white man's weapons and politics. And after years of battles with enemy chiefs, he emerged the victor and king of a unified island nation, until his death in 1819. This statue of Kamehameha is at Kapa'au, the king's birthplace, on the Big Island. Early one day in the distant past, eons before the first human beings, a certain mischievous demigod named Maui decided to slow the progress of the sun as it moved from dawn to dusk across Hawaii's second largest island. He lassoed each ray and tied them all to the earth until the sun agreed to linger longer over this special island forever. No wonder the 10,000-foot volcanic summit of Haleakala, Maui's crown jewel, is a magnet for visitors at dawn. Most of these people have been up since 4 a.m. to make the steep 2-hour journey to the most spectacular sunrise in the world. Haleakala, the House of the Sun, has not erupted in more than 200 years, and geologists have declared it dormant, that is, sleeping, but not extinct. This huge volcanic basin, 7.5 miles across, with its vivid colors and contrasts, its peaks and ravines carved through the centuries by water, wind, and fire, present an eerie kind of beauty, one of desolation and solitude, and beneath it all, enormous power that may return at any time. The slopes of Haleakala still nurture life forms that have evolved only in Hawaii, but are quickly disappearing because of the changed environment. One is a plant called silver sword, of the same species as the American sunflower, but looking very different. In Hawaiian, this plant is ahinahina, gray. Silver sword lives for as long as 20 years, blooms once, then dies. Another unique life form on Haleakala is the nene, the Hawaiian goose. In the 18th century, there were an estimated 25,000 nene on the Big Island and Maui. By the year 1951, only 30 birds were known to exist anywhere on the islands. Today, after years of conservation efforts, the Hawaiian goose population is thought to be in excess of 500, and the nene is the official state bird of Hawaii. The most common species on the summit of the House of the Sun is human. Many of these are seen just after sunrise, mounted on 2 wheels, bundled against the wind chill at 10,000 feet, headed out for an exhilarating bike ride, a white-knuckle descent from above the clouds to near sea level. For many bicyclists, veterans and amateurs, this brief, high-flown adventure in paradise is one of the reasons for coming to Maui. There are other rides on the slopes of Haleakala, and more surprises. In the cooler atmosphere above the beaches are unique stands of eucalyptus trees whose ancestors grew in Australia, and even small cattle ranches. Yes, this is still Hawaii. There is in fact a winery in the upcountry on what used to be a sugar plantation, now producing varieties of wine and champagne using, in part, grape stock from the Napa Valley of California. That plus 50,000 gallons of pineapple wine annually, most of which is shipped to Japan. Homegrown wine in paradise. Besides Haleakala, Maui's other major volcanic source is Pu'ukukui, cloud-shrouded in the west, the first Maui peak to surface from the sea about 1 million years ago. It is extinct, but hang on, because everything else in Maui is very much alive. The slogan here is Maui no Ka'oi, meaning Maui is the best. You'll get no argument from natives, visitors, and the growing population of part-time residents and condo owners. There are more millionaires per capita on Maui than anywhere else in the world, and the grand resort atmosphere of this island is not something that just happened accidentally. Plush hotels and condominiums like these at Ka'anapali have been part of a joint strategy by business and local government starting in the 1970s to lure the international upscale vacationer and world traveler. And once again, Maui's magic has worked. There are so many fairways and greens here that it's been nicknamed the Gulf Coast. But Maui's truly unique sporting action is a few miles from all this driving and putting, back in the surf at Paia and Ho'okipa on the North Shore, the world capital of windsurfing. This picture represents one aspect of Maui. And here's another. The Iao Valley, rising from the narrow isthmus between the extinct and dormant volcanoes, a cool retreat from the coastal resort scene 1,000 feet below. The Iao Needle, a Maui landmark in a setting of higher peaks and ravines, sculpted by erosion and often screened off in cloud and mist. It hasn't always been such a peaceful scene. Here, Kamehameha defeated all his rivals in a terrible climactic battle that turned this creek red, and the village downstream was given the name Bloody River, Wailuku. More than 2 centuries after the event, Wailuku is a quaint, colorful part of old Hawaii, with many historic buildings, all evoking an atmosphere of the 19th and early 20th centuries in paradise. We're now on the west side of West Maui, at the old whaling village of Lahaina. In its heyday, probably the most rambunctious port in the whole Pacific. Whales were big business in the 19th century. Oil rendered from whale blubber lit up the homes and streets of the haules back on the mainland. It was also used as a lubricant and for making candles and soap. The boom started in the 1820s, when hunting grounds near the equator were exhausted and the whaling fleets turned north, first to the Sea of Japan, then to Hawaii. In 1824, about 100 ships called at Lahaina and at smaller island ports. By the 1850s, 5 times that number of whaling vessels, with their crews, lusty and thirsty, were transforming paradise into something more earthy. Gambling, prostitution, theft, smuggling, extortion, political corruption, and an occasional homicide gave Lahaina a reputation that took decades to undo. The era ended slowly and painfully, as the whales diminished in number and the Civil War back on the mainland bottled up shipping. The coup de grace came when oil was discovered in Pennsylvania. Lahaina today, a fun, informal waterfront town with cafes, galleries, and boutiques. But Lahaina does remember itself. Many of the old buildings have been restored, and the town's most prominent feature is a 2-masted brigantine sailing ship, a visual throwback to the rough and tumble days when men could make fortunes from the gentle giants of the sea. Now, Hawaiian waters are safe haven, and whale-watching cruises operate from December through April, when the humpbacks come down from the north to winter in Eden. On October 23rd, 1819, the year Kamehameha died, a small band of Protestant missionaries left Boston Harbor on a 6-month trip round the Horn to the Sandwich Islands. Other ships would follow, and the missionaries' impact on Hawaii would last forever. The ministers, Congregationalist mainly, built gleaming white clapboard churches with steeples after the fashion of their New England homeland, and then set about the serious work of converting the native population. High on the agenda of social change, along with the introduction of haole medicine, hygiene, and education, was the need to put more clothes on Hawaiians, and of banning the hula, a means of storytelling that seemed shocking and sensual. The hula was, and remains, as much a language as a dance. Arms, hands, hips, torso telling tales of kings, gods, ancestors, and feats of nature. Hawaiian had never been written. The missionaries were faced with a language whose entire vocabulary could be expressed with the 5 vowels plus H, K, L, M, N, P, and W, just 12 letters. And so Hawaiians learned of the foreigners' pule, religion, and palapala, schooling, and pono, morality. When finally the native chiefs and nobles, the ali'i, were converted to the Calvinist God, the missionaries' triumph was complete. By 1839, the entire Bible had been translated and printed in Hawaiian. And the state of the language today? Carol Kapu, a Maui teacher, says Hawaiian is alive and well heading into the 21st century.
Our language is going through, our Hawaiian language is growing in the sense that our culture has been going through a renaissance with, I think from 1972 it started. The University of Hawaii has a School of Hawaii Studies. And so our students graduate from the University of Hawaii, and then they go into the schools to teach not only the culture but the language. And our youngsters are coming up now speaking fluent Hawaiian.
It's been said that the 2 most important elements in early Hawaiian history were religion and whales. But the profit that the haoles reaped from whale oil was minuscule compared with the fortunes that started growing straight from the earth in the mid-1800s. The most far-reaching change ever made in Paradise was the cultivation of sugarcane, a plant that had long grown wild. The first plantation started up in 1835, and before the end of the century, sugar ruled the land. King cane, they called it. New sources of labor were found, mainly in the Orient. Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino. Today in the Iao Valley at Heritage Gardens, there's a memorial to those workers who left their Asian homes to plant and reap and help create Hawaii's extraordinary ethnic variety. Moving toward the 21st century, sugar is no longer king of the islands, but it does remain a key element of the economy. And what could be more Hawaiian than fields of sugarcane waving gently in the trade winds? More valuable Hawaiian agriculture, back on the Big Island, Kona coffee, world-renowned for 150 years. The plantations grow 1,000 feet above the Pacific on the northwest coast. Pure Kona, unblended with any other variety, is considered by many connoisseurs to be the paragon of all coffees. There's also the big business of macadamia nuts, so much in demand nowadays that orchards are taking over land that had been devoted to other crops. Mac nuts are found just about everywhere in Hawaii, whether chocolate-covered, chopped, ground, or as flavoring in various dishes and dressings. And, of course, pineapple, which, hard to believe, is not native to Hawaii. How the first plants got here isn't known, but it's fairly certain that they were not brought by the first Polynesians. A few miles west of Maui's beaches is a small island whose name has been synonymous with pineapple for the better part of a century, Lanai. In 1922, a man named Jim Dole bought the whole island for just over $1 million and turned it into a big plantation. So if the words pineapple and Dole ring a bell today, that's why. The pressure of economic changing times has upset the industry nowadays. 40% of the world's pineapple is grown in Thailand, where labor costs are a fraction of Hawaii's. And this agricultural island is starting to sprout tourist resorts, like its neighbor Maui. However, Lanai is more than pineapples and hotels. Small as the island is, 17 miles long, 13 wide, Lanai has its own personality. The red earth and desert-like vistas and warm, dry climate can evoke visions of New Mexico. And the big skies and long rolling distances are reminiscent of other western landscapes back on the mainland. Of course, the coastal scene is very much Hawaiian, formed by volcanoes and the never-ending motion of sea and wind. Scientists believe that Lanai, Maui, and Kaho'olawe were all once a single island, and that the Arctic melt-off at the end of the last ice age raised the sea level, making 3 out of 1. Headed northwest again, backward in geological time, to what may be the most charming and rustic of the islands, off the main tourist routes almost unknown to the average vacationer, is Molokai, nicknamed the Friendly Island. The population of Molokai is barely more than 7,000, and its 263 square miles are mostly farmland. The principal meeting place is Konakakai, a genial combination of hometown USA, Oriental Main Street, and Wild West Cowtown. In terms of atmosphere, it's light years from Waikiki, which in fact is a scant 50 miles away. And there's a rugged natural beauty to match all this down-to-earth charm, especially along the eastern shores toward Cape Halava, and at Mo'oula Falls, a 250-foot cascade that plummets from the island's lush high country on the windward rainy side. Uncrowded, unpretentious, life on Molokai is definitely in the slow lane, and one wonders how much longer this island can preserve its atmosphere in an age of booming tourism. As it is, only 1 out of every 70 visitors to Hawaii goes to Molokai, and a lot of folks here hope it stays that way. An interesting Molokai stopover is the Meyer Sugar Mill Museum, only a short drive from the airport en route to the Kalaupapa Peninsula. The mill was operated by a German immigrant, R.W. Meyer of Hamburg, from 1878 to 1889, and then because of drought and falling prices, it was abandoned and fell to ruin. A century passed before some local history buffs raised money for its restoration. Now the mill stands as a kind of monument, most of the machinery intact, including the steam engine that turned the centrifugals that separated molasses from raw sugar. Nostalgic reminders of King Kane, now at the crossroads of 2 more centuries in paradise. For some visitors, the journey to Molokai has something in it of a pilgrimage, and this has been true for more than 100 years, since the 10th day of May, 1873, when a young Belgian-born priest named Father Damien stepped ashore at the Kalaupapa Peninsula carrying only his prayer book and walked into a world apart. Only 12 years earlier, King Kamehameha V had ordered that all persons with leprosy be banished to this remote spot, which was to become known as a living tomb. For 16 years, Father Damien worked among the exiles, treating the disease, laboring, organizing, appealing for outside help. There was irony in the fact that a haole had come, because it was foreigners, beginning with Captain Cook's men, who had brought such diseases to the islands: cholera, smallpox, measles, influenza, syphilis, gonorrhea. and leprosy. In 100 years, the native population of the islands had dropped from 350,000 to 50,000. Finally, in 1899, following years of struggle, he died of the same disease whose pain he'd helped to ease among others. And he was interred next to the church that he and his friends had built with their own hands, St. Philomena's. Today, leprosy, known as Hansen's disease, can be cured through the use of sulfone drugs that were introduced in the 1940s. Properly treated, patients no longer transmit the condition, and isolation is not necessary. All of this helps to explain why thousands of travelers each year come from all parts of the world to visit Kolaupapa and pay their respects to the memory of Father Damien and to those who worked alongside him in those pioneering times. Here's one way to get to the Kolaupapa settlement, by mule. The others are by air, sea, and on foot down the mountainside. But the Molokai mule ride has become a kind of institution, like the donkey trek down into Grand Canyon. It begins 1,600 feet above the sea and winds down a primitive trail through the woods with many twists and turns to the destination, 3 miles later, Kolaupapa. The remaining residents are descendants of those who lived in Father Damien's time, and they come and go freely. The settlement now has its own post office, fire station, library, store, landing strip for small planes, 3 churches, and even a Lions Club. Hawaii's third largest island, Oahu, seems to have been fated right from its volcanic origins to emerge as the political, cultural, and population focus of all the islands. Geography made it so. 2 great natural harbors, Honolulu and Pearl, have shaped Oahu's destiny as the capital of the Pacific. 80% of Hawaii's population lives here, most of them in the high-rise metropolis of Honolulu. And the main force that drives the capital city is a mighty industry called tourism. Oahu's nickname is the gathering place. The business of gathering earns Oahu the major share of tourism revenues for the whole Hawaiian state. Since before the turn of the 20th century, the focus of Oahu's vacation land has been that glittering, often jam-packed 2.5-mile strip of beachfront called Waikiki, dominated by the most familiar of all Hawaiian landmarks, Diamond Head. More than 30,000 hotel rooms, plus condos, plus over 250 restaurants, plus every imaginable shop and boutique, Waikiki is definitely where the action is. But even first-time visitors quickly find that Oahu has many dimensions. An excellent place for an overview of what the locals believe is Hawaii's loveliest island is at the Pali Lookout, only a short drive out of Honolulu. From here, it's a clear view up and down the windward coast and into the high country that separates the 2 sides of the island. Like Maui, Oahu was formed by 2 volcanoes, the lava creating a range of majestic summits, valleys, jagged peaks, and sheer cliffs. All of this a half hour from the beach at Waikiki. Nearly 70 diving operations are active on Oahu, catering to crowds of snorkelers and scuba divers who come to explore the reefs of Oahu. There are charters for groups and certified divers all over the island to give lessons to individuals who've decided, for the first time, to take the plunge. More than 600 species of tropical fish thrive in Hawaii's waters, including a large number that are found only here. And after so many years of human presence down below, certain fish have become quite tame and can even be fed by hand. Some of the pros have even befriended a few moray eels, who don't seem to mind a friendly pat on the head in exchange for a bite to eat. This definitely is not recommended for the casual diver. More Oahu-style water sports are found off the windward shore, among the best surfing areas in the world, even in the summertime when waves like these are comparatively gentle. Just a short distance from the best surfing beaches is one of Oahu's principal attractions, the Polynesian Cultural Center, a carefully created environment of waterways, small islands, and model villages. Here, native representatives from places such as Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and New Zealand, as well as Hawaii, demonstrate island lifestyles.
Are you ready? Yeah! Okay. Do you see the smoke? That's fire. Transferred burning particles to the puller. Holy smoke. Hey.
Throughout Polynesia, the root of the taro plant has provided generations of islanders with a rich and unique source of nutrition. Taro, with its finished product, poi, pounded and ground, is an extremely nutritious food, rich in vitamins and minerals. The plant was brought from the Marquesas and Tahiti by the original settlers of Hawaii, and is still a popular element of the diet among many Hawaiians today. What does poi taste like? Actually, it's almost tasteless. The flavor comes from added herbs, spices, and other foods. Also on Oahu's windward side is a popular attraction called Sea Life Park. Here the big entertainers are porpoises and whales, whose sheer ability to learn, plus their obvious joy in performing, make for the most unusual show. On the opposite end of the island, in the northeast, is Waimea Falls Park, an 1,800-acre botanical garden and nature preserve that was once the site of an ancient Hawaiian city. Now it's a popular stopover on the Oahu touring circuit. One of the main events here is cliff diving, an act of daring that has some very interesting historical connections. Diver Art Rivers says that the father of Kamehameha the Great was an accomplished performer himself.
King Kaikili achieved a reputation for jumping off of cliffs into pools to prove his bravery to his warriors gathered below. And the pool here at Waimea was one of the first pools that he dived into. He did live in this valley. Ever since then, the tradition of cliff diving and cliff jumping, both for fun and for reasons of bravery, has continued. The ancient Hawaiians also played a lot of games when they were jumping off of cliffs. They played Lele Pahu, which is a contest to see who can make the largest splash, like doing cannonballs or can openers. And also Lele Opu, which is a contest to see who can make the smallest splash or the quietest entry. And that's like today's modern competitive diving events, where that's again a main objective.
Not very long ago, the 50th state passed the 50th anniversary of the key event in the modern history of the islands, the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 that launched America into World War II. Every year, more than 1.5 million visitors come to see and to experience for themselves the calm and stately environment that was a battleground half a century ago. Above the wreckage of the battleship USS Arizona, this graceful memorial, whose design captures the swing of America's mood and hope during the war. The downward sloping center symbolizes the feeling of defeat immediately after the Pearl Harbor attack, while the two ends rise strongly to signify victory. Directly under the building, just beneath the calm surface, is the Arizona herself and the 1,102 officers and enlisted men who went with her to the bottom of the harbor on that long-ago Sunday morning. Visitors leave sentiments behind in the form of leis thrown in the water, honoring the sacrifice made by the defenders who fought and died, in all more than 2,000 men and women, on December 7, 1941. Not far from the harbor in Honolulu itself is the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific that spreads over the vast grounds of the Punchbowl Crater. Hawaiians call this Puawaina, the Hill of Sacrifice. Seemingly endless rows of cement tablets mark the graves of 21,000 casualties from World Wars I and II, Korea, and Vietnam. Almost 100 miles northwest of Honolulu is Kauai, the oldest of these Paradise Islands, the first to emerge from the hot spot at least 5 million years ago. Kauai has had more time to become itself and to live up to its nickname, the Garden Isle. It's the greenest island in the chain and has more than its share of spectacular vistas, often made even more dramatic by cloudscapes of light and shadow that turn even the ocean into special shades of emerald, blue, and gray. There are some who claim that Kauai by itself is the most beautiful island in the world. In such a setting, it's only natural that the pace of life be slower, and indeed even the beaches of Kauai, uncrowded as they are, have a very different atmosphere than those of neighboring Oahu. Relaxed, unhurried, untroubled. That's the tempo of Kauai. More than half of Hawaii's taro crop grows on Kauai, fed by a water supply that almost defies imagination. More than 400 inches of rain per year on the higher peaks, finding its way over cliffs and through ravines to the sea. 5 million years of richness, of steady temperate growth and flowering have made all this. Kauai's most recognizable landmark stands like a sentinel on the northeastern shore. The Kilauea Lighthouse. This concrete tower, looming high above the surf, has been a beacon for passing sea and air traffic since 1913 and was instrumental in the first airplane flight from the U.S. Pacific coast to the Hawaiian Islands in 1927. The lens, made in France, weighs 4 tons and magnifies more than 1 million candle power of light. Kilauea Lighthouse, 200 feet above the waves, radiating light 90 miles out to sea. These days, Kilauea Point is a national wildlife refuge, home to several species of endangered seabirds that have been displaced because of the loss of natural wetlands through agriculture. Not far from the lighthouse are taro paddies, maintained especially as habitats for these same endangered birds that used to flourish in the days before sugarcane replaced so many taro fields. One way to experience Kauai's ecological environment is aboard a flat-bottom passenger boat on the Wailua River. A 3-mile mini voyage upstream past fields, landscapes, and even grazing cows. The riverboats meander for an hour and a half before reaching their destination upstream at the entrance to the Fern Grotto. From here, a trek on pathways through dense jungle growth to a lush volcanic cradle. This region, by the way, was once a burial ground for Hawaiian kings. On the island's southern shore near Poipu Beach, a combination of lava and surf have created one of Kauai's biggest attractions. It's called the Spouting Horn. The geyser-like explosions are triggered by onrushing waves that work their way under the lava shelf and then burst up through the opening. Right there beyond the reef is another, on the way. Kauai's most striking geological feature has been formed by a fault in the Earth's crust, helped along by centuries of eroding weather and the constant flow of rivers and streams. Waimea Canyon is the Grand Canyon of the Pacific, with its own majestic high country character. A 5-million-year journey through time, from the coast of the Big Island of Hawaii to the Napali coast of Kauai. 5 million years, but a bare 300 miles between this island, the oldest, and the youngest, the volcano island to the south and east. The word for thank you in Hawaiian is mahalo. Till next time in paradise, aloha and mahalo.
Kulei lo ke lani la kulei lo